So when you're planning to win, right? If you don't have a plan, you're planning to lose. So it doesn't mean the plan is stuck for the next 5 years. It means that you're thinking about it before it happens. So when we plan to win, we are mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually aware or planning for what we want to do next. When you start writing stuff down and you start thinking about things, it just speaks to you.
What does it take to lead with vision in a world that's driven by distraction? Today's guest, Dr. Dave Jones, has gone from professional hockey rinks in Europe to the boardrooms of thriving businesses, where he now coaches elite athletes, executives, and ministry leaders on how to win the mental game. He's the founder of M is Good, a marketing agency powered by Kingdom Purpose, and the creator of the R7 Vision Framework, a powerful model for leaders who want to align their mission with eternal impact. He's also the author of Vision Wins and the host of the R7 podcast. In this episode, we're going to explore what it means to lead with purpose, why vision is more than a buzzword, and how spiritual and mental disciplines are essential for high-level leadership. Dr. Dave Jones, welcome to Seek, Go, Create.
Oh, man. I'm so honored to be here, Tim. Thank you for having me.
I'm glad you're here too. Let's get like one little thing out of the way. We were about to talk about this, but you've got doctor in front of your name, but you're wearing a Superman hat for those that are watching us on video. I saw some stuff that said Super Dave, which is fascinating. I see Doctor, I see Dave and David. It's like, man, what do you go by, man? What do people call you?
Yeah, such a great question. In high school, I grew up as Wonder Dave because I played hockey and I played pretty good at it, and that kind of fell off. And then, I have this really cool name, Dave Jones, which is the second most popular name in the world, probably. And so everywhere I go, it's, Dave Jones, who? Like, which Dave Jones are you? And then I hit the CrossFit world when I was 40, and I did pretty good at that. And so it became Super Dave. And then, I've been in rinks and a lot of rinks and coaching a lot of different players, hockey players. And, I go in the rink and it's Super Dave, and so my kids call me Super Dave. It's kind of fun. Hey, Soup, what's up? So it just kind of stuck. And then I've been chasing this journey for my doctorate in sport and performance psychology for 13 years. And on December 6, 2024, I defended my dissertation and now became Dr. Dave. So a lot of my friends around me are like, there's no way I'm calling you Dr. Super Dave. Like, that's not going to happen, So it's Super Dave, it's Dr. Dave, It's fun, man. Like, we're having a good time with it.
Dr. Super could be kind of like a Marvel type
yeah,
character
for sure.
or something like that. Hopefully not a villain, hopefully a good guy.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think you remember back when it was actually Super Dave, and Super Dave was not like a Marvel hero. He was kind of a goofball. Like, it was the worst production ever, and everybody loved it. So that's more about me, having fun and like, messing things up, but still goofing on it. So, unfortunately, there's no Super Dave apparel out there. So I just buy the Superman stuff and call it Super Dave.
So this is like idle banter that somebody's going to go, hey, could y'all get to the vision stuff? But it's kind of funny. When you first came across our desk, this will kind of tell you where my mind is. I didn't see the Super Dave initially, which I would have gone directly to Super Dave Osborne for those that even don't know what we're talking about, kind of an older reference. But I actually thought your name said Davy. And I was like, Davy Jones, man, wasn't that the lead singer of the Monkees? It's like, that's still how old I am. There's younger people going, what the heck is that guy talking about? But it's like, man, I would love that. That would be so cool. But anyway, you are the man and the one I need to be speaking with. So I've got Dr. Super Dave Jones here. I think I might go by Dave unless you correct me as we go along. But unless you say something, I might either lean towards a doctor or super just to emphasize what we said there. But hey, first question I like to start with, sort of related to that, but a little bit different. And that is, would you prefer to answer the question, what do you do or who are you? Pick it and start answering.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with who are you? Because I feel like, so who are you I think that when we have this common language that we use, you meet somebody for the first time and they say, "What do you do?" It's kind of a question of, how do you make money? And I feel like it's a very misleading question. And this probably drives a lot of identity crisis in the world, this common language that we use. And so, because I've worked with so many athletes and former Christian organizational leaders and current, in this transition period, identity is a big deal. And so, when you have performance related questions that really over time build up, that you actually think you are, what you do. And the reality is, we have problems with I like to call our flap, our fear, lust, anger, pride. And so when your identity's in your fear, lust, anger, pride, it's how many cars do you have? I'm president, I'm vice president, I'm a hockey player, I'm not a hockey player. Whereas when your identity is in Christ and it's not performance related, who are you becomes a funner question because, I am a man of God, the best of my ability. I'm not perfect. So let's be clear about that. I'm a business owner, I'm a husband, I'm a dad, I'm a coach. This goes back to vision. Who you are is not what you do. And so who I am, I unify excellence in the marketplace. That's my vision. Those that have heard me talk in the past, they've heard my vision over the years. When you point to vision, it takes away the identity side of what you're currently doing. We live off of peaks and valleys in our life. Nobody's awesome all the time. And so in the valley, I believe, is where the Lord wants you to glorify him. And so if our bank account has one comma in it and we're feeling bad about ourselves, it's really hard, right, to glorify the Lord. If our bank account has 2 commas or 3 commas in it, we feel really good and we're unstoppable. But the reality is your identity is in your pride, not in glorifying the Lord. Now that was really heavy, really fast.
I like it. I made 2 or 3 notes here that we're going to kind of keep going heavy because this is important. See, I think what we're doing is I always say we're diving into the deep end of the pool, but we're going to some core stuff right away. And we're going to get to in a little while. I've gotten to a good portion of your book, Vision Wins, 7 Strategies for Mental Toughness in Life and Sports. And I want to tell you, Dave, that I don't hear the word mental toughness much anymore. And so we're going to talk about that in just a second. But so mental toughness is a topic. I want to talk about how it relates to vision and mission and things like that, especially within the R7 framework. But you brought up something to me that is at times a word that's what I call Christianese. And it's language that we use in the Christian or followers of Jesus world that maybe someone who's not in that world doesn't know what we mean. And you mentioned that you are who you are, your identity is in Christ. And I believe that I know what that is because I've been living that life for a while. And I believe other Christians, truthfully, I went to Bible school for a couple of years. I don't think a lot of people know what that means. So I think one of the first things I'm going to do, and this is again, more deep question. Why don't you explain in your words?
Let's start with what it's not, right? It's not your bank account. It's not your cars. It's not, forgive me, but how hot your wife is or how skinny your wife is, how long you've been married, like these are kind of the worldly triggers. What living a life of Christ to me, but it means that you're a follower of Jesus, that you're reading the Bible, that you're praying daily, that you're trying to do what's right by the Word of God, not what's right by whatever the wind is blowing in today's political or in sporting environment, And so it's doing your best that you can to live a life according to Christ. That's what that means. So I follow the Bible. I'm very open about I am a right-wing, Bible-toting, gun-carrying Christian. And I glorify the Lord in everything I do, whether it's, and some days I would say that some days are better than others, honestly. But I'm always going back to what do the scriptures say? How do I react to this? I think, having the fruits of the Spirit are important, as kind of a checklist So love, peace, patience, self-control, this is what it means according to the way I see the world, which is not always right all the time, but it's following Jesus.
Yeah. Have you always been that way?
I have not been all this way. I didn't. I grew up. I grew up playing hockey. I won a state championship early on in my high school career. I got really drunk. My brother, who was going to Moody Bible Institute, came home the next day after you know, after I was trying to recuperate, and I was just, you know, on the bed and just out for the day. And my brother came and said, "Hey, do you want to live a life like this?" And I'm like, "No." And he's like, "Do you want to receive Jesus as your Lord and Savior?" I'm like, "Yes, I want something more than this." I was 16 when that happened. I went on to play juniors and pro in Europe, and it wasn't till probably my second or third year in Europe where I was like, you know what? I was 22. I had met a woman that who's my wife now of 25 years. He said, "You know what? Let's do a better job of living a life of Christ and try to follow him and read and pray." And that's when it all began. So that seed was in there. It just took a while to get out. And even then, my journey is 25, 26, was still like, I just didn't like myself at all. So I had to turn off the TV. I had a mentor come in my life and say, "Read these books for the next 2 years." And I did.
Mm. So what's interesting is that it sounds as if you started off, you were talking about the valleys
Yeah.
but it sounds to me like winning a state championship when one is probably identifying as a hockey player
Hmm.
during that stage of your life. I think you identified as a hockey player probably. And you reached the pinnacle, and the next day there was a door that was open that was, we'll call it the seed. And there may have been others
Hmm.
before that, but talk about that because I know you deal with a lot of athletes and all. We might be getting into some of that shortly, but talk about with you personally what it was like to be at. I mean, there's probably nothing higher that you could have done at that stage than to win that championship in that sport, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, I was 15, 16 years old and freshman in high school. And so, winning a state championship in a state that wasn't known for winning championships was a big deal. It was a town of 16,000 people, and, the whole town came out. I was, a celebrity at that point, and we had climbed the summit. We had done it. We were on the peak. And I don't know. I think I was probably too young to understand what all that meant. It was just celebrate and drink some vodka and orange juice. you know, Looking back on it, it was definitely, God working in my life. And so I think looking back on it again, I think there's bigger pinnacles, and I've studied them all from the Super Bowl to the Stanley Cup to, MLS, on a world stage, which is much more difficult to navigate than a 15-year-old winning a state championship.
So, would you have, looking back now, especially, this is a good question to ask, would you have said you were mentally tough at that age? And if you were, what did that look like then? And if you weren't, I guess kind of grade your mental toughness at that point.
Oh man, I was weak. I was fragile. I was not tough at all. No way. I mean, it's probably 45, I think, before I really probably knew what mental toughness was and how to use it, honestly.
But you were
Um,
doing well with what we'll call it. This is where I'm going to start maybe
yeah.
drawing the barriers between how I define in Christ or in the world.
Okay.
This is where I'm going here. Is that you were doing things that were leading to success in that world system, but yet something was lacking that was drawing you into, we'll call that the kingdom of God
Yeah.
system. So, and that was in the 20s, and a lot of people go through it. A lot of people go through it later in life, whatever. And I think it's all a journey that we go through. But I mean, you were doing well in that world system, correct?
I probably just felt like that's it. It's got to be something more. It's interesting when you turn to drugs and alcohol, isn't it? Like to release the pressure or the stress. You feel like that's the way to do it, to let go. People do it all the time. In fact, I like to say, like, fans being a fanatic of a sport, is an acceptable way of deflecting the real issues. We socially accept that. Hardcore drugs, we don't, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah, and in my world, one of the things that's acceptable in the business world, you're operating in the business world now too, obviously,
Hmm.
is that it's acceptable to be addicted to what I call more. It's
Yeah.
not a drug or anything, it's just more. I need to make more money. I need to
Hmm.
expand my business. I need to make more whatever. I need to work more hours. And that addiction is what I've battled. That's part of my journey. It is rewarding in that world system, but it's not in the
Hmm.
kingdom of God system. And so that's interesting. Now, one of the things, this is one of the reasons I was drawn to you. So
Okay.
let me go ahead and kind of get maybe a controversial type topic out. I love sports. I really, really do. So I want to preface this next statement and what it's going to lead to questions with. I do love sports. However, I do wonder in our culture and society if we are elevating sport to almost idol status in many
Hmm.
situations. And it's one of the reasons why I want to talk to someone who obviously sports is your world. You work with people in that arena. You also work with people that have great ministries in that arena.
Yes.
And so if I say something like, hey, I believe that sports, and especially the way we're doing it now, seems to be like we're building a lot of idols, respond to that statement.
There's so much there to unpack, honestly. I'll just take in a direction. You tell me if you want to go a different way. I think the athletes I work with, they don't ask for that idol. So I think we're all trying to become the best version of ourselves, whether we believe in Jesus or not. Like, we want to see how far we can go, whether it's your average golfer, whether it's I'll use hockey because I'm familiar with that, like whether you're a 16-year-old triple A or double A player or college or pro, you're just trying to see how far you can go. And some guys go farther and gals go farther than they ever dreamed of. And so people want that. They want to know, like I use Tiger Woods as an example. Most of us can relate to that. Like, how did he do that? I mean, it's so incredible of how he did that. And so we're just attracted to that excellence, that peak performance. We want it. We want to duplicate it. And it's probably in that lustful side for sure. Imagine if we had that same kind of lust for Jesus, right? That same kind of like, I want to emulate what he did. And we know the Satan's there to kill, steal, and destroy and provide confusion. And so why not deflect us back to sport, to man? It's a failing system. I think the athletes that I work with, they're not really like asking for the idol side. They're just chasing it. And we, in some level, we want to know how to do that. And, what are the triggers or the bad habits that I have in my life that I can get rid of so I can be a peak performer? I think inherently, whether you believe in God or not, there's something about the human wanting to be better and wanting to live. I had a real unfortunate opportunity of, a couple years ago watching my dad die. He had lung cancer and he was 80 years old. And he had smoked for 40 years. He had stopped for 20 years, but it came back and, he got diagnosed in November and then he died in April. And it was really interesting to me, like very emotional, lots of grief still going on today. But how, when I just watched that, because he went all over to hospice and like, and for those that are not familiar with hospice, like it's a place where you go to die, they basically turn it off and make it a comfortable transition for you. And it just really kind of blew my mind how much the body wants to survive and how much the body can survive on nothing. And so like in all animals that God's created, it has a survival side of it. And I think we want to do more than that. We want to push the envelope.
Yeah, and I love the word you use, excellence. My dad passed a few years ago too, had some
Mm,
cognitive issues and kind of watched it also. It's kind of like, and we look at him cognitively, physically he seemed kind of strong and it was almost like, we were saying, how can he keep going?
yeah.
And but yet does my wife's mother's that way. Her body has been pretty rough for going on 30 years now. but she's still, sounds bad, hanging around, hanging
Yeah,
around.
it's crazy, right?
I can't believe how strong and that will to live, I think,
Yeah.
is what we're talking about. I want to circle back to that one more thing related to sports, and
Mhm.
and I guess it's the pressure that culture and society is putting on it. And I just this morning read a quick blurb about a 5-star quarterback, high school kid that was being recruited by Oregon and University of Georgia. I'm originally from Georgia. I'm not a Georgia fan. I want to be real clear about that. I went to Georgia Tech. But I'm just sitting here thinking about this kid. He committed, decommitted, and now they've got all the NIL money and they've got
Mhm.
contract, they've got big time stuff that's always been around. Now it's kind of out in the open. And I'm just sitting here thinking about 17, 18, 19-year-old, I hate to call them kids. That sounds, kind of downplay, but what happens with mental toughness
Yeah.
when all that kind of stuff's being dangled at you, and you've got grown men telling you how awesome you are? And the reason I kind of was thinking about it, Dave, is that they commented in this article that in the last 2 days, while he was making this flipping decision, he went from one to the other. Both of the offensive coordinators and maybe even the head coaches had come to his place, sat in his living room, and were pitching and recruiting this kid. Sorry. But I mean, how are we dealing with all that stuff just from a mental standpoint? And I mean, business people are too, and people in ministry and all that. But boy, we're throwing a lot of stuff at some of these young athletes.
Oh, for sure. And I have a really kind of strong definition of mental toughness. I'll just tell you what it is. So it's playing or performing. So in business world, you're performing. Obviously, in sport, you're playing or performing at the upper ranges of your ability, consistently under pressure in the biggest moments. That's mental toughness. So what I'd love to also say is sports is a petri dish of emotions. So once pressure happens, that's where we see where you're at. So like when I watch games now, I don't really watch for the X's and O's. I watch for the pressure, see it come in, and then just watch the players and how they deal with it. That's how you know if somebody's strong or not. It's super easy to watch and fun to watch. And so then I call that low EI. So when they're mentally weak, they have low emotional intelligence. So when you have low emotional intelligence, it's all about you complain, you blame others, you're in what's called a weak channel. All you can think about is an emotion, what this person did to me. Your team mindset goes out the window. You're focused on winning, not on the process. There's a whole lot of things that happens when you're low EI, when you're mentally weak. And so same thing with performance. So like when you're talking about organizations and organizational leaders, everything's fine when you're in your office by yourself. But once you get around employees and now maybe there's not as much money in the account or somebody says something to you that you don't like, the pressure happens and now we see what's inside.
It's interesting. I just had an example come to mind that's sort of recent, and I'll bring it up and let you either comment on it, or I'd love if you've got a recent example of a sport example where that'll kind of put a timestamp on this episode, but I don't care. I don't watch a lot of sports or anything anymore because I realize I can actually get addicted to
Mm,
the watching of it. You know what I mean? It's
yeah.
not my business like yours, so but I did catch the last hour-ish or so of the Masters about a month ago with Rory
Yeah.
McIlroy, and we had a place not far from Augusta, Georgia, for the longest, in a golf mecca and things like that. And I believe that may be an example of what you're talking about. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I can. And in fact, I've studied him. I've studied Rory. So this is the difference between process thinking and outcome thinking. So when you outcome think, it's all about winning. Like he's had that on his shoulders of winning the Masters for a long time. Winning, winning, winning. And so when it comes down to that 18th hole putt and it's a 3-foot putt, if you're not, and who knows what he's thinking? I'm obviously speculating here, but he missed the putt. So, and he's made those putts a lot. It's hard to say how many, but a lot. And so when you're always thinking about the outcome, it's a sign of weak thinking. You're not into power channel. And so when you're process thinking, you're thinking about the mechanics. You're thinking about the details. You're not thinking about the winning. You're not thinking about the score. You're thinking about what's in the moment. And we've seen players like Michael Jordan, Wayne Gretzky, Mario Lemieux, Crosby, all these players play in the moment. That's what elite performers do. They are able to just have tunnel vision of what they're dealing with right now. So it's playing at the upper range of their ability consistently under pressure in the biggest moments. So they're able to do that, and they train for that.
Right.
Yeah.
I want to go a little bit deeper on that because I
Yeah.
had a thought just to bring the audience that may not be, that have seen it. Rory had the opportunity for what's called a career Grand Slam, where you win the 4 top majors in golf. The Masters, I think he had opportunities for 11 years or something like that, because he won the other 3 at a very young age. And he still has a lot of age, but that stuff starts creeping up on you a little bit. And he was leading by 1 stroke. No, he could have, on the 18th hole, making a short putt, he would have won it, and he missed the putt, so therefore it was going to go into a playoff. What I would love to do, and I know this is speculative, but I would love to tap into a bit of a sports psychology, mental toughness example that's real world and recent for me. I'd love for you to talk to me a little bit about what you think was going through his mind after he missed the putt. It's going to a playoff. There's probably 20 minutes or so that they've got to go back to the tee box of 18, and they're going to tee off and play the hole again. And it's sudden death for those that might be familiar. It's like whoever gets the lowest score first in the playoff holes wins. And to finish the story, so people aren't on the edge of their seat, I believe he birdied, the other guy parred. I can't remember the other name now, but can you, in your mind, knowing kind of what you know now, wrong,
Yeah,
whatever.
so you got the facts right.
But in your mind, what do you think mentally he was doing in that time between missing the putt and going back to that tee box at the 18th hole?
Yeah, so let's go back to the first time he played the 18. He shanks his shot, right? And then he hits a good tee shot, but his second shot's in the bunker. And then he's got to come out of the bunker, and he comes out with like a 10-foot putt, and he misses it, which forces the overtime. So the 20 minutes where he's like having to go sign his card and go, I think he's reflecting on everything that happened the first time. And I think he's probably, if there was a coach there, is in his ear saying, just relax, man. Just go have fun. Right? Because he was so stressed, and you could tell he was stressed and tense in that second shot when he hit it in the bunker. He was just thinking about winning, winning, winning. Whereas now as he comes back and he hit a great tee shot, his second shot is within like 8 feet, right? And so it's like he's in his groove. And so it was all that stress that he was able to let go and realize, okay, I can't play this way. Just have fun and just play golf.
Yeah. And I think that applies to other parts of our lives. It may not be as narrow of a focus within just a few minutes that we've seen, but him arriving there wasn't a few minutes either. That was a much, much longer journey. And that gives me a great opening. That's a good segue here. We talked about, your hockey career early on, and you went over to Europe and played some, and then you found Christ around your early to mid 20s. Bring us up to where we are now, but I'd love for you to give me a couple of the peaks and valleys between that time and where you are now. And then we're going to move into talking about R7 and some of the things you're doing with M is Good. I want to ask you a couple things about the book, but just give us a couple of the journey ups and downs along the way before we do that.
Yeah. Such great questions, man. There's so many ups and downs in there. I would say I got a slap shot in the face. Broke my nose in 3 different directions, cut the nerves in my teeth and my mouth, deviated septum.
Oh, you mean literally got a slap shot in your face? I thought you were talking about, life just brought. No, you literally got a slap shot in your face.
I got a puck in the face in Kalamazoo K-Wing Stadium. And so I had 3 R's of gauze of each nostril. There were tubes in my nose, and I couldn't breathe out of the tubes because I got all clogged up because of mucus. And so I had to breathe out of my mouth. The next 2 weeks, my tongue is cracking and bleeding at night. And that was a low. That was one of the first times I got on my knees. I said, Lord, what do you want from me? Because this is not like I didn't pray. I was 21 years old. I didn't pray. I wasn't really reading the Bible. I just knew I need to go to a source. And the source that had never really failed me was God. So I just said, you know what, God, what do you want me to do with my life? This sucks. Like, this is terrible. And so I ended up going overseas and playing. And, that was a good career. I ended up, playing there for 4 years and then coming back. I started my company when I was 28. And again, I had taken a sales job with Fox TV, and I really didn't like it. And so I went back to prayer. I said, Lord, what do you want me to do? And I found myself staring at a list of all the Christian organizations on the TV station. And I thought, I'll just start an ad agency. What do I call it? And the Lord gave me Marketing Ministries. And it wasn't like an audible voice. I was just like, Marketing Ministries? That sounds cool. Could that be it? So I didn't know what I was doing. I got a lawyer. And he said, yeah, Marketing Ministries available. And I was like, oh, that's cool. That name will work. I thought it was kind of a dumb name. And I'm like, all right, Lord, you're not so dumb after all. And so I began to start my company. And out of that list, I went to that list after I left, and I said, hey, before I left, I said, I'm going to start an agency. Will you follow me? And out of the 21 on the list, I said, yeah, we'll follow you. We're in. And so that was like in a November timeframe. In January, I actually went back to him, and 18 out of the 21 said, we're not with you. That was a low. So the first year, I think we invoiced $15,000 that year. And I made 15% commission from that 15,000. So that was bad. The second year was like 30,000. That was bad. Third year was like 200,000. Still not good. 15% of 200,000 is $30,000 a year. I'm not setting the world on fire. And so at this point, my faith is being challenged. But I guess I just knew that something good was going to keep going. Something good was going to come out if I kept going. So I just never really looked back. I just stepped out on faith and just pushed. The fourth year, we billed $800,000. And the fifth year, I just never looked back. I'm on my 24th year now.
Did you, during that time, though, I'm just curious before we move on, and I love when we talk about, just had faith to keep going, when you're getting 15% of what people can't 15% of what people can't live off of anyway. And I'm sure you were probably, if you didn't have family or anything at that point, even if you're single, that's probably tough. Any considerations of, did you hear the Lord? Did I make a mistake? Do I need to go do something else? Do I need to just go get a job? Do I need to do something different? Any of that, we'll call it doubt creeping in, but sometimes it's just the process of going through the different options and all. And I'm not sure that it's always entirely bad, but any of that going on during that time?
Tim, all of that's going on. The doubt, the fear, the anxiety, the stress. Are you sure? Are you not sure? You talked about common Christian language. I call that obligatory religious phraseology. It's like we say this stuff and nobody knows what it means, and like we go, okay.
And neither do we often.
Exactly. Like I had some of that around me, but I don't know, man. I had this intuition. I'm just gonna keep going. And I just don't resonate with the idea that God can steer a parked car. Like, I just don't sign up for that camp. Could God steer a parked car? Well, God could do anything, but can God really steer a parked car? Like, if you're sitting around and going, okay, God, it's just going to happen, because it's just going to happen, it's going to be your will. I just don't think God works that way. Like, you got to go after it. You got to open the door. So, Tim, I've always had this kind of idea of a hallway. And the hallway has as many doors as you can see in this hallway. It's probably 50 to 100 feet long. And you got to open the doors. You got to physically walk down the hallway and open the door and go, that's not the door for me. Or this is the door for me. I'm going to see let's go explore. Like, you got to move. You know, you know what? I'm not the most talented guy in the room. I'm probably not the smartest guy in the room, but I will come early and I will stay late. I can do that. Right? I can think about it 16 times and get it wrong, and then come back the 7th and 18th time and get it right.
Yeah, I like that parked car analogy. The thought that came to my mind when you were bringing it up is, yeah, God could move a parked car, but why would he create a car and not expect someone to start the engine and actually move it? That doesn't
Come
make any
on.
sense at all.
That's right.
So, yeah, he could pick the car up, he could rain down fire on it and disintegrate it, whatever. All that's fine. But
Yeah.
why go through the effort of creating that car if you don't expect it to move? You said earlier, Dave, that you believe that in the valleys is when we glorify God. And you've mentioned a few valleys along the way. Were you, sort of a trick question here, do you believe in looking back you were glorifying God, or were you in the process of attempting, or what would you say about yourself during your valleys, looking back on them?
Man, these are questions I've never been asked before, so I love this. This is great. I think on a scale 1 to 10, 10 being the best, I've probably done a 6 on like glorifying the Lord. I've always kept it in front of me, but there's always that time like, oh my gosh, how do I glorify the Lord here? Like, this is too tough. I remember, this is a really cool story. I remember back in 2010, the market had took a serious dip in 2008. We didn't feel it, but we felt it in 2010. And, at the time we were doing a lot of media buying, and I just didn't have a whole lot of cash flow. And so one of the media companies called and said, you're not on 90-day terms anymore. You're on 3-day terms. We need $50,000. This was on a Wednesday, and I'm driving from Dallas, Texas to San Antonio in a 12-passenger van because I forgot to set up the rental car, and the only thing they had was a 12-passenger van. And I get a call, and they say, hey, we're turning off your terms on Friday. It's a Wednesday. We need $50,000. I called one of my mentors, and I said, hey, man, can I borrow $50,000? I'll pay you. I promise I'll pay you back. And Tim, he laughed at me. He just laughed at me. He said, Davey, this is where you're going to trust the Lord. Everything's going to turn out all right. I'm not giving you $50,000. Glorify the Lord. And I was like, oh my, come on, Jerry, please. I just need the 50K. And that was one of the biggest. I was so scared. You know how you have like anxiety, but then like the somatic anxiety where your heart rate and you're sweating and you're just uncontrollable. It's like drinking too much caffeine. Like, I had this for about a day. I'm like, I'm going to be shut down. And so that was a valley. And I learned a hard lesson there. And I was like, okay, I will go, it all worked out. I ended up working out terms with them, ended up making payment plans. And I figured it out, but yeah, that was one of the times where I turned to somebody wealthy who could help me. And they told me no.
And that was probably one of the best things that could have happened.
Best things.
So you got a hockey puck to the face again, proverbial, not an actual.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's interesting. The cool thing that just came to mind is like you gave yourself a 6 out of 10, and probably a lot of us, we could say, yes, I need to glorify the Lord when I'm in those valleys. And if I look back, I would probably be generous to give myself a 6. I didn't do anything, I think, detrimental, but I was whining a lot more. After '08 was when a lot of our financial issues were too. A few years after that, we were homeless and bankrupt, and, all kind of things went on. Looking back, it was a great thing. In the midst of it, not so great. But that's where God's grace comes in. That's why, that's why there's multiple things going on here. Yes, I think ideally it would be awesome if we're at a 98% glorifying and on, oh Lord, yes, you were so awesome. But man, I was whining. I was whining.
Yeah.
And so that's where his grace kicks in and he kind of says, okay, we're good here. So now catch me up and tell me all that you're working on now, because at some point you started moving into, I'll call it coaching. I guess now you're technically a sports psychologist, but you're working with, athletes and people like that. You're also still, I think, have the marketing company. We're going to bring up the book in just a moment. But when did all that start to come into play?
It's honestly been a journey, a lifelong journey. So, Emma's Good is 24 years old. We've got 38 to 41 clients we manage on a weekly basis. Our vertical is Christian organizations. So we work on their messaging and their KPI management. I just been pushing hard on psychology. I kind of believe that psychology is study of human behavior, sports psychology is study of human behavior within sport. And so I just got attracted to behavior and, not the idea of psychology because it comes from a very, dark place, but just that study and how we read things, how we react to things. It plays well with Em is Good because Em is Good is about messaging to a certain audience or audiences throughout all the demographics we have with different clients. And so I just chase that and, I'm not really like a big title guy, as we've discussed before. I wanted a path to study psychology and I looked at the academic world to give me that path and I chased it all the way to the terminal degree, which happens to be sport and performance psychology. And so it's just really been me chasing that and the marketing side of things through the coaching, the executive coaching. I was a chairman of the board with FCA Hockey, Fellowship of Christian Athletes Hockey, for about 10 years. And so some players had asked me, hey, can we chat? And I said, sure. And so that's just ballooned into something a lot of fun for me to talk to different from the NHL down every week on their performance and their ability and how they chase peak performance with the idea of, Christ as their center. So, yeah.
So if someone told you you could kind of only do one of those things, you had to peel some things away. Which one? This is one of these trick questions that you
Yeah.
wish you didn't. Which one is nourishing your soul the most right now, Dave?
It's such a great question, and I think I don't really I don't really look at them as two, honestly. And it kind of goes back to how I vet different clients that come into our organization or come into M is Good as a potential client. I usually tell them, listen, we don't discriminate based upon budget. No ministry is too small, no ministry is too big. This is about how do we create messaging? How do we get your identity right so that we can attract more people to the Lord? That's what it is. There's a vision inside of you that wants to come out because that's who you're created to be. And so if I can help you with that, I'm excited to be on that journey with you. And so it's not the sport or, the player or the organizational leader. To me, they're one and the same because they're both created in the image of God to glorify him. Honestly, I don't have a weight one way or the other. I prayed to him that I would be used by God. That was my prayer. And you know what came back? Are you usable? I was like, Lord, use me. And I just felt like, am I usable? Man, I don't know that I'm usable. I need to be usable by God if I'm going to ask that question, right? Please use me, Lord, for to help other people become peak performers in your economy, not the world's. And so I had a checkup from the neck up when I said, okay, I need to be usable, right? And that's where this flap thing came from: fear, lust, anger, pride. I need to get rid of some of this stuff. Although we're all dealing with, two of those at any given moment, like we just become better. That's the other thing I feel that I need to say in this podcast that I just want to come clear is that, being a Christian is not being perfect. The difference between a religion and a relationship is totally different. Like here say, oh, you're religious. I'm not religious at all. I have a relationship with my Heavenly Father, and that's a relationship that sometimes I'm not very good at chasing him and listening to the Holy Spirit. So I just want to be clear that it's just about a relationship and it's about doing the best that you can. That's another cool definition that I have. Excellence. Excellence is doing the best that you can with the current resources available to you in this moment.
Yeah, I like the in this moment, and I like the word resources. Some
Yeah.
people like to throw in money or talent or different things like that, but it's resources, and I think that allows everyone to sort of relate to it. There's one
Yeah.
thing that you brought up, to be usable. As you were saying that, I was kind of asking, I was kind of thinking to myself, I wasn't
Yeah.
wondering, I was with you. I was
Yeah.
thinking to myself, am I usable? And I realized that over the course of my life, I am usable, but I attach conditions to it. And I think
Mm.
we attach conditions, especially those of us that are in what we call this first world, incredibly comfortable. We're sitting here. I'm in an RV, but still, we're in roof over our heads, things like that. I think there is some conditions, but I think it's part of a process where those conditions start to fall away, or at least I hope that they do. And you probably have seen that on your journey, I guess, too, is that,
Hmm.
we talk about usability at one stage in our life, and, you start off early on as a Christian, you go, that probably means I'm going to go to Africa, be a missionary, I'm going to be
Right.
living in a hut. Anyway, but the usability is for that car that God created that's sitting there for it to be used in the way that he created to, for that engine to get started and get going. And, there are Ferraris, there's trucks, there's whatever. We could go down that analogy. But anyway, there's so many places that we could go here, Dave.
Can I speak to that just for a second? What you had just brought up. I love the, like you're in an RV, being usable. I kind of look at your walk with Christ as almost like a U.S. diplomat. When you're a diplomat, no matter where your feet land, you're on U.S. soil. And so, like, as a Christian, no matter where you're at, you're an ambassador for Christ. Doesn't matter what you're doing. And so, that brings in the integrity, the honesty, the fruits of the Spirit, love, peace, patience, self control, no matter where you're at. You don't have to be in the four walls of a traditional building to be a Christian. Going to church doesn't make you a Christian. And so it's where we're at. It's our involvement every day is how we glorify Him, right? Like, except for the grace of God, there go I. And believing that you're an ambassador for Christ. There's so much accountability there. And when we talk, I love Ephesians 6 because it's talking about the armor of God. Like, I'm going into battle, man. Like, I'm battle ready. I'm ready, Lord. Send it. And let me see how mentally tough I am as I walk through these minefields of these peaks and valleys.
Yeah, spoken like a true hockey player. I'm sure you're
Yeah.
all suit up and ready, going to battle and all. So,
Yeah.
hey, Dave. A lot of people, especially people listening in, would go, "Oh man, it would be so awesome to only work with Christian
Mm.
businesses within marketing and things like that." This is the way my mind works.
Yeah.
I know it's not always awesome. There's some issues with Christian businesses, especially when you start trying to help them with their messaging and
Yes.
getting the word out. Tell me what some of the cons are, or some of the issues and challenges with working with Christian businesses. Do not throw any of your clients under the bus or anything. I know
Sure.
you're not going to do that.
Yeah.
What are some things you have to deal with there that may not be so awesome?
Well, first of all, there's never any money. That's a problem. In my experiences, a lot of Christians want it cheap. They want it for nothing. They want free advice. They want free this, free that. Like, I've turned away so many clients this is one of my favorite words. Hey, we want to partner with you. And so this partnership has really got me on edge. It's like, okay, let me just be clear. Are we really partners? Because partners share and they go back and forth. Or is this code for, I want to use your payroll for my vision? Because that's normally what it is. Yeah, I'll give you the idea, but you run with it. And so I've tackled that. I can't be more fired up about your vision than you. So I would say having a budget coming in has usually been rough in my experience. I'll also say that there's, like we were talking about earlier, this idea that, that God can steer a parked car. There's so many times where like we just lean on the Lord and that's it. So the hustle, the come early, the stay late, it's typically not there. And so they want things cheap and they want things done, where somebody else does the work for them. That doesn't work. I would also say that breaking the mindset, which I think I've done a pretty good job over the years, of obligatory religious phraseology. it is bad. Discipleship, hope, grace, these are all words that we really don't understand. I'm not even sure I understand. I just know that the way we're positioning it within the Christian community doesn't work. We don't know what they are, and certainly the audience we're trying to attract to doesn't. Yeah.
Yeah. So, man, that was also good. I'm so glad I asked that question.
You
It brought
got me
me
all
back
fired
to
up.
a Yeah, no, man, man, that'd be like a whole episode right there.
Yeah.
Because it brought me back to a conversation I had in Bible school where I've always been a business guy. I was saved in a business setting. So business is the way my mind is wired. I'm not saying that's always good. It's just the way I'm wired. And so the whole, I'll call it the religion structure. Notice I didn't say the kingdom of God. I said the religion structure isn't really my language and my place because of a lot of the stuff you just brought up. But I remember having a conversation with another business guy at Bible school, and there was this great business idea that someone had, and we said, man, this would be great for missionaries. If they could do it, they could make money. They wouldn't have to come back and beg every time they come to the United States. And he said, Tim, he goes, I got to be honest with you. We've talked to some missionaries about it. And he goes, and they're lazy.
Yep.
They're not willing to work. And I went,
Yep.
man, I don't like hearing that. And that's something that we've had conversations here on the show often. And I love the fact that you are functioning and operating in the marketplace, and you're probably forcing these conversations about mission, vision, mental toughness, excellence, all the words that we've been talking about. Somewhere along the way, that led to a book. I've got it here. It's on my Kindle called Vision Wins.
Yeah, let's go.
And 7 strategies for mental toughness. That's why I said, okay, mental toughness is good in life and sports. And tell me a little bit about what brought you to write this. And then I've got some comments and a few questions about the book. Just in the, I'm at 40%
Okay.
in the book right
All
there.
right.
So I'm in the middle of Elliot and Kelly's story, and this guy, JJ's
awesome.
come in. So, and I've seen the word Zamboni a few times, which for a guy from Georgia, I love to be able to say it. I'm pretty confident that over 300 plus episodes, it's the first time Zamboni has been said on the Seek, Go, Create podcast. So tell me about Vision Wins.
Yeah, so years ago, I'm a big fan of John Gordon. If you read any of his books, I just love how he writes fables. And I had the opportunity to carry his luggage to a meeting once. It was through an FCA event. And I was his chaperone, making sure he was taken care of. I had some time with him, and I just asked him, how do you write a book? And he told me. And they told me the process. So I sort of said, someday I'm going to write a book. And that's exactly how I want to do it. So I wanted to be a fable. I didn't want to be like the 7 strategies for, mental toughness, or just 7 strategies. I want to tell a story around it. So it took me a couple years to build out the characters. And I have this huge mind map of Kelly and Elliot's, their genealogy. And I just started building out the characters. And the way John writes books is like, he just does his life. And he's like, oh, this would be a cool setting. And so like he puts that down. This is the setting. And so I had been in Edina, Minnesota with my son playing pond hockey. And I'm looking around. I'm like, oh my gosh, Minnehaha. Like this would be such a cool street name, And so like, and the Edina, we're playing what they call it the ODR outdoor rink there. And it was like on this pond in the middle. It was awesome. I'm like, this is my setting. So it's in Edina, Minnesota. And Kelly and Elliot, they go through this venture together of, how they're trying to be the best version of themselves, And so they have a mentor named JJ, and JJ walks them through the R7, and he happens to be the Zamboni driver. Actually, he reminds me a lot like you, Tim, like corporate guy, kind of doing something different, totally out of the blue of what you would expect. So JJ goes to be a Zamboni driver, like no one expected him to do that because he's a high paid consultant executive, but he's got this R7 inside of him. And so he basically pulls Kelly and Elliot aside and kind of gives them parts of the R7 throughout their experience at the hockey rink.
Yeah, it's the part that I've gotten to is good storytelling. And I love the fable, parable.
Yeah.
I call it fiction with a mission type storytelling. That's what I did with the novel that I wrote a few years ago. And I had some characters in my novel that people would ask me questions. They said, is Cooper you, or is Asa you, and all of that. And I'm not going to give the answer, but I'm going to ask you the question. You've got Elliot, young male hockey player. You've got Kelly, who's female, and things there. And then you've got JJ. And I'm sitting here as I'm reading it, trying to guess this person I'm about to interview, Dave, wonder which one
Yeah.
is him. So I'll ask you that. Which one is more you? Because I know
Yeah,
there's
so I
parts
think
of you there.
yeah, so like you and I have the same mind, man. Like I definitely wanted each one of those characters in the book to reflect somebody or a conglomerate of somebody. So I am JJ in the book. Yeah.
I figured that. And so
Yeah.
so they're moving down a path as I'm reading. It's going to reveal this R7. I'm just getting to the beginning, but starts with vision and mission. We only have a couple minutes here, but give as much of an overview as you can about R7 in just a minute or a few seconds here, so that people can get a glimpse of what they will learn when they get a copy of the book.
Yeah, so R7, I'll shorten as much as I can. I got hit with a prophecy in Germany in 2008, and the prophecy was R7. And for the next 3 to 5 years, Tim, you'll love this. These mentors showed up in my life and just really just mentored me on vision, strategy, brand, communication, praying, and step 7, take action. And so that's R7. Now it's very much fine tuned now over a 15-year period. I've walked hundreds and hundreds of executives and professional athletes through R7. It is, to me, it is the foundation of creating a brand. I've created brands without messaging. It doesn't work. I've created messaging, just basically building the bridge as walking across the bridge as you're building it, putting the bricks down as you're walking, kind of thing. So this is a high level strategic process to build a brand.
Yeah, that's good. Just but tell
Yeah.
people where. I know the book's on Amazon because I actually got it on Kindle Unlimited, which was cool.
Awesome.
Tell people where they could find all your stuff. We'll include it down in the notes, but M is good, and anything else that you want to share. Then I've got one more question that's kind of my exclamation point question for you.
Sure. You can find me at misgood.com. All my R7 blogs, I've done probably in the last 15 years. I don't write many blogs, probably like 4 a year. So I make sure that they're pretty rigorous and detailed. So I'm doing a pretty good job with the R7 podcast and writing a blog first and putting the podcast up. So if you want to consume more, it's at misgood.com.
Very good. All right. So the subtitle of the book is 7 Strategies for Mental Toughness.
Yeah.
So Dr. Super Dave, someone's listening in and they're questioning whether or not they've got the mental toughness that they need.
Mm.
I'm going to let the Holy Spirit lead,
Yes.
you 30 seconds to speak directly to that person that really is questioning their mental toughness and they want to increase it, encourage them.
Yeah, so first of all, I just want to encourage you for asking yourself this question. I think there's a level of mindfulness that maybe you're not mentally tough. And so now you're thinking about it, which is huge. Yeah, I think in a fixed mindset, you can go, yeah, I'm good. I don't need to do any of that. That's where, excellence does not happen. So just by asking the question, it's powerful. Just say, okay, am I mentally tough? So you're mindful that you're not, which is great. The next step is being mentally tough is not about how you were born. It's not about your genealogy. It is about how you're thinking about the world. And so the easiest, simplest thing I can say is, and it's the slogan of mental toughness training, which is plan to win. So when you're planning to win, right? If you don't have a plan, you're planning to lose. So it doesn't mean the plan is stuck for the next 5 years. It means that you're thinking about it before it happens. So when we plan to win, we are mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually aware or planning for what we want to do next. When you start writing stuff down and you start thinking about things, it just speaks to you. And so that's what I would say.
Excellent. So good. Dave Jones, author of Vision Wins, 7 Strategies for Mental Toughness in Life and Sports. Get a copy of the book. Like I said, I'm about 35% through, and it's great storytelling. I'm real curious now what's going to happen with Kelly and Elliot as they go along. And I'll get to hear more Zamboni. That's really cool. I love to use that word. Thanks, Dave. We appreciate you joining us here. We're Seek, Go, Create. We've got new episodes here every Monday. Cool stuff just like this every week that we're bringing people in that are just helping us be the people that we were created to be. That's what we're all about here. And so thanks for joining us, and we will see everyone next week on Seek, Go, Create. Hey, before you go, I want to leave you with a challenge. If you're enjoying the conversations here on Seek, Go, Create, I think you'll love the deeper journey my novel Coach, A Story of Success Redefined, takes you on. It's a story that's moved many of my readers to rethink what success actually means and how to live a life aligned with faith, purpose, and peace. Pick up your copy today wherever you buy books or at timwinders.com and begin the journey for yourself. Thanks again for listening. And as always, keep seeking, keep going, and keep creating.